Alright, so I don't think this deck needs any introduction. I might be the last person on this YouTubing space to go over this deck, but I figured that it'd be my time to go over this deck and then talk about some things that other tubers have not been talking about, which is this deck post banlist and post legendary destruction, so basically the new set. And then on top of that, I also want to talk about this deck's viability here in the TCG, which is something that a lot of creators haven't gone over yet because they talked about Tenpai months in advance. And, that probably doesn't apply anymore, considering how they don't have any information on how to play this deck post banlist or where it even stands. So I'm going to split this video up in a bunch of parts, and in this first part here, I'm just going to go over the deck, and then obviously I'm going to go over the ways you can play this deck into the new format and all the versions of how this deck can play. And then also the last thing I just want to go over is how to beat this deck. And in terms of beating it, I just mean like, what cards are good against it essentially. So yeah, that's pretty much the entire breakdown for this entire portion. So let's go ahead and get started on the first part of this video, and it's just me going over some of the cards. So most of you guys will probably skip this part because you guys know what the Senpai cards do already, but for the people that don't, let's go ahead and get started. So here's like pretty much the starter card of the deck, which is Tenpai Dragon Bidora. If this card is normal summon or special summon, you can take one Sengen Spawn Trap card and add it to your hand or set it, which is going to be typically Sengen Kaiman, or you can take the Sengen Manor. The Manor, I'll go over it right now, is basically a card that's like a midfield breaker being its first effect. And then the second effect is like a rota for the deck by discarding a card, right? So it adds a Tenpai Dragon discarding a card, very similar to cards like Spiral Resort. Can't target, and it's also a starter card as well. One of the best cards in the deck, honestly. And the next card is Sengen Kaiman, which is essentially an E-Telly. Its first effect is you can add a level 4 or lower fire dragon monster from your deck to your hand, but you're typically going to be using this card in the battle phase. So it gains an additional effect, which is the second bullet point, which is you can special summon one fire monster from your hand. So it literally E-Tellys the card, so whatever you add, you just special summon it. Right, so these are the cards that you're pretty much adding off Sengen, or these are the cards that you're adding off Tenpai Dragon Bidora, and both of these cards support your OTK strategy, which is basically this entire deck. Next up, we have Tenpai Dragon Zongdora, and Zongdora doesn't have an effect on summon, but when you attack with it, you can special summon a level 4 or lower fire monster. So as you can see the synergy here, the Zongdora will get to the Bidora. So yeah, they pretty much grab each other. If you have Bidora, then the Sengen can grab into the Zongdora. But these are the cards that pretty much get into your engine. If you guys want like a somewhat comparison, this one is probably your like Ray of the deck, and then this one is like your Rose of the deck. If you guys get the Sky Striker reference, they're both starters, but the yellow one, Bidora, is a much stronger starter, but they both work, right? Next up is the Fadora. This card can honestly go to 1. This card is basically just the Debris Dragon in the deck. It's basically when your combo is already resolving / grind game card. Think of it as like a Tae in Sword Soul. This is pretty much that type of card. So it definitely can go to 1, but right now I'm messing around with 2. Sometimes you do need it in the combo, but very rarely do you actually need it. And something to consider is that this deck can also play Pot of Desires and not just Prosperity, which is something that's, I think, could potentially even be better, right? Everyone talks about how the specific deck can like OTK over, over what is it, like 30,000 damage, so Prosperity doesn't matter. But I actually think the card advantage in this deck matters a lot, especially since you're always going down in hand size. So for example, the whole entire goal of this deck, right, is to go second, but the problem is once you go second, you're going to be using 3-4 hand traps, whatever it is. I mean, look at all these hand traps here to stop your opponent, right? But then when you stop your opponent, you don't have enough cards left. Like, let's say you have a Sengen Manor and you activate its effect, which costs a card again to discard a card. You might be low on card. Let's say they Ash Blossom this, or like they Ghost Ogre this, or like whatever, right? Then it's like, oh damn, I just went minus a card where you were. Desires, for example, could give you that missing +1, which I think is something up for debate for, because I actually think the +1 kind of matters in this deck, and that's the same reason why I would probably play 2 Fedora, because you definitely don't want to banish 1. So like I said, I went over the Sengen Manor, it's another rota for the deck, and then I went over the Sengen Common. So that's pretty much the entire deck for the engine. This is pretty much it, and everything else is non-engine plus consistency cards in terms of more hand traps, or Pot of Prosperity, or Pot of Desires. Whichever one you choose to play. Now we're going to go ahead and go for the extra deck, which is, let's go over some of the extra deck cards, which is Sengen, Rise Dragon, Bident Dragon. So this card is basically your main monster that you're going to be summoning. It reads, if this card is synchro summoned, you can target one fire dragon monster in your graveyard, special summon it. Also, you cannot special summon monsters for the rest of the turn except dragon monsters, which doesn't matter at all. You can only use this effect of Sangan Rise Dragon, bind it once per turn. If 3 or more attacks have been declared, you can special summon this card from your graveyard, destroy one spell and trap on the field. You can only use this effect of Sangan Rise Dragon, bind a dragon once per duel. Also does not matter because if this card hits the field, the game is typically over. So one cool thing to note here is all the synchro or all the monsters here that let you quick synchro in the battle phase, which is basically their niche, right? All of them read where is it? Once per turn during the battle phase, you can immediately after this effect resolve synchro summon. They're once per turn per copy, so if you summon a different copy, you can just use it again, which is super troll. So basically the restriction isn't even a restriction because that never actually matters, right? And this goes to show that the power of this deck, right? So this is the first card that you're typically going to be synchro summoning into because it lets you reborn a dragon monster, which then, you know, releases that once per turn effect because now you summon a new copy off this Bident dragon, and then you can keep going and so on and so forth. Then the finishing blow that you're going to be summoning is the Sangan Super Dragon Transcend Dragon, which is kind of funny because if this card hits the field and it connects, your opponent is probably scooping already, so none of these extra cards actually matter. It'd be funny to see how many times you actually summon these cards because the game is typically over when this card hits the field, but we'll read it anyway. If this card is synchro summon, you can change all monsters on the field to attack position. It doesn't really matter. All your opponent's monsters must attack. It also doesn't really matter. If able, also your opponent cannot activate cards or effect during the battle phase. And a lot of people read this and they're like, damn, this card should be banned and it's broken. But to be honest, guys, if you've connected this many attacks, I'm gonna say it right now, they did not have anything during the battle phase for you to stop anyway, right? So I don't think it really matters there. And then if 3 or more attacks have been declared, you can special summon this card, destroy one card in the field. You can only use this effect of Sangan Super Dragon Transcend Dragon once per duel, which again does not matter, right? Because they're typically dead anyway. So then we have the Trident Dragon, obviously the super expensive card as we all know. Everyone knows what this does, but it pops 2 cards on your own and then it attacks twice, so this is just 9,000 damage essentially. Black Rose is pretty cool because it works very well with our Brimming Sangan Manor because they cannot respond to our Black Rose Dragon, and then once we clear the field in the battle phase, we can just activate a card of Sangan Kaiman and then do the standard OTK off of 1 card. Moonlit is pretty cool in this deck. Same reason as a utility card. Odd Eyes Meteor Burst, I actually really like this card because it's similar to like a Black Rose Dragon, but when you activate this card, let's say they don't have too many cards on the field, what it actually reads is monsters your opponent in your opponent's possession cannot activate its effects during the battle phase. So once you hit battle phase and you have this card, they actually can't use any quick effects or anything like that, which is pretty interesting in some senses when you need to go for a game when there's something that's preventing you from doing so in the battle phase, right? Next up, Ancient Fairy Dragon for the going first combos, which I will go over. Zulkin, Crystal Wing, and Heretic Seal for all the go first combos. Hita, Princess, Raging Phoenix, and Zelantis. Funny enough, if this deck gets hit with Dimensional Barrier, you actually can go for a Hita, Princess, Zelantis line. As you can see, these cards don't actually lock you into anything. You know, it would make more sense if these cards locked you into synchros, but they don't, right? So yeah, you can actually go for this under Dimensional Barrier. It's a little bit costly, which is why you need Hita, because you don't have as many bodies as like something like a Snake Eye deck does. So you do need to go through the Hita and cards of that nature. So that's pretty much for the entire deck overview, guys. Let's go ahead and go over to the next portion of the deck, and I'm going to talk about all the different ways that you can play this deck. Alright guys, so let's go ahead and talk about all the different options that we can use to play this deck, and also the cards that I've been trying out that I think is pretty good against this certain matchup, right? So one of the things that you can do, which is pretty cool, is you can do lots of tricks with Ancient Fairy Dragon on your turn 0. Now, I will show you guys a combo later on in this video if you guys are still confused of how it works. But the Ancient Fairy Dragon allows you to do a variety of different plays involving things like shooting Rhyzar Dragon, or the more popular one, which is Crystal Wing, which is one that I showed in deck profile previously, which I think is the best one because it's the most generic one. Crystal Wing being a monster negate will just be good against anything, right? But then shooting Rhyzar, it very depends on the exact matchup that you're playing against, but it is options that you can do with the Ancient Fairy Dragon. Now, I do play Where There's a Will, There's a Way Out, which is a card that you can set off of the Ancient Fairy Dragon, which is how the combo works, having Heretic Seal plus Zulkin. But a different option that you can use instead of when there's a will, there's a way out is you can also play cards like Necro Valley, which is actually pretty good against Snake Eyes with a board, because they can't resolve cards like Flameburst Dragon, and they can't use things like Diabell Star's wanted effect in graveyard, and they can't go for like Heat Alliance and then so on and so forth, which is like not bad against that deck at all, especially if you're backed up with the hand traps. Sometimes it's like, if you have like, let's say, a Nibiru, for example, now you can Nibiru and not worry about Flameburst Dragon coming back, right? So I think Necro Valley is a very solid option for how some of these Zolkin combos work out. Another thing you can do with this deck as well is play a bunch of board breakers, which I've seen a lot of people do, which is, Lightning Storm, Book of Eclipse, Forbidden Droplets. I forgot to put it here, but obviously all the Talents cards, Thrusts. You guys get the idea, right? Just board breaker cards outside of Dark Ruler because you're trying to kill them. The problem with this is that right now in the TCG, if you guys have been on my channel or haven't been keeping up, if you guys just found this video randomly, the Snake Eyes deck currently right now is playing this Omega Dissipator combo, and with board breakers being on the rise, or like if people do start playing board breakers, you're just gonna get your hand looped, and this is a very popular build because it literally just won the most recent YCS. So people who are playing Snake Eyes are definitely trying to do this Omega hand loop thing, which is pretty annoying, I would say. So these board breaker options are an option, but I don't think they're that great due to how the meta is warping right now. Now, I do think the best cards, and the 3 cards I put down here, which I think are very good at beating the deck, is number 1, Ghost Ogre. Ghost Ogre on the field spell is just way too powerful. Now, the thing is, they can play around it, but the problem with that is, I've seen people talk about how, like, they can play around Ghost Ogre if they don't just activate this card, right? But the thing is, that implies that they've already opened the other piece, which isn't like a crazy thing, right? Because those cards are, at 3 each, but sometimes they just don't have that card and they need to get this card to resolve, right? Because, like, bro, if they draw like their 2-card combo without having to search for it, then it's like, damn, well, you got it, bro. So the Ghost Ogre is very good in this aspect. It also lets you if you Ghost Ogre this card, one of the main things about this card is that it reads that Fire Dragon monsters you control are unaffected by card effects. So if you Ghost Ogre this card, not only do you stop the search, but you also get rid of the protection effect. So now your Veilers, Imperms, Ghost Mourners, all those targeting cards are now back online. So I do think Ogre is the best one. It also hides from spell and trap removal. So if they play Lightning Storm, Cosmic Cyclone, Twin Twisters, all those sorts and so on and so forth, you're not going to get hit with it with Ghost Ogre because it's safe in your hand. Another card that's very similar to Ghost Ogre, which we definitely have not seen in the OCG because it is a TCG exclusive, is Vados the Eruption, Dragon of Extinction. A very anime-ish name there. But it reads, during the main phase, if this card is in your hand, quick effect, you can target 1 card in the field zone, special summon this card to your opponent's field. So it's kind of like a flying sea. It goes over to your opponent's field, not on your field, and it destroys that card. It's essentially Ghost Ogre, but it just special summons to your opponent's side of the field. And then it also has a very funny effect as well. And that is, if this card is sent from your opponent's field to the graveyard, you can destroy all monsters on the field. So if they ever link this off, you can just blow up their field, which is pretty strong actually, because what are you gonna do when you have this card, right? Like, they want to play with it, but they can't really get rid of it. And also, you can choose to get rid of it on your turn. Let's say you pop it or something on your turn, even if they decide not to link it off, it'll still trigger their effect, which is pretty good. It's not super relevant, I think, but I do think it's definitely a strong effect, right? I mean, come on, it's a board wipe. It definitely can come up, and most likely will come up. So I think this card is a better version of Ghost Ogre. However, the reason why this card might be a little bit worse than Ghost Ogre, even though, like, on first glance, you might be thinking, well, yeah, this card's way better than Ghost Ogre. It's just the fact that this card can only be sided against this deck in particular, because it literally only destroys field spells, right? Ghost Ogre, I mean, it's Ghost Ogre. We've had this card for ages. It can actually do more than destroy field spells, right? It can do lots of different things against a multitude of matchups. But if you are playing the Vados, it's basically saying, hey, I'm targeting Tenpai specifically. That's pretty much what this card is designed to do. And obviously it has some other niche interactions, right? I mean, like, I guess you can destroy Divine Temple. It might be not that good, but I guess you can destroy Runic Fountain. If they don't have Hugin, then it's okay. But for the most part, this is a Tenpai exclusive card. Next I want to talk about is Cosmic Cyclone. Very similar to the way we were dealing with Sengen Manor. They probably will let you go first. So Cosmic is a good card. Cosmic isn't the best card, but the reason why I did put Cosmic here is because into our current format it has a lot of cross matchup against the Runic Stun decks. Also very good against Fire King Island, and it's a good card in the meta, so that's why I think it's included in here. Obviously, there's a bunch of other cards out there in the Yu-Gi-Oh universe that probably hits this deck, but it's too specific towards this deck, so I didn't cover them at all. But I do think these are the ones that are very, very standard. I think one thing that you can also play if you want to think of a floodgate card that's good against this deck, that a Snake Eyes deck can play, is a Skill Drain, which is why I think Runic Stun has a crazy matchup against this deck, because Skill Drain is very, very strong. They're strong against this deck. They pretty much all of them cannot play under Skill Drain. So yeah, this card has been pretty good. It also works very well in Snake Eyes deck, or pure Snake Eyes as well, because you can just flip this card and play like Flamberge Dragon attack control, and that's pretty solid as well, because you can also activate Snake Eye Ash under this card to summon out Flamberge, so that you can play this Blue Eyes Beatdown against Tenpai, and this card is very, very solid. So this is pretty much for the entire portion of all the ways you can play this deck, different varieties, that I went over, and then pretty much all the cards that I think that are going to be hot to beat this deck that are more in the realms of realistic, because there's a bunch of other cards like I said, but these are the ones that I think are more realistic, that are in the meta, that's good against multitude of matchups. So write these down. These 4 cards are here, good against the deck. Obviously a bunch of different ways to play. Now we're going to go over and show you guys some of the go first combos, and then obviously some of the 1-card combos that I think every video has, but for the sake of this video, let's go ahead and include those as well. So see y'all over there. Alright, so I'm pretty sure everyone knows all the go second OTK lines with this deck, so I think for the combo portion of this video, I'm just going to be talking about this one specific combo, and it's the going first part of this entire deck. If you guys don't know, this deck is typically meant to go second, so if you guys are playing this deck, there's tons of combos out there, and I'm pretty sure everyone knows it, so I don't think I want to waste anyone's time with talking about how one Bidora or one Zongdora is OTK. It basically is. If you guys can't figure that out, then sorry, but I'll find another video, right? But I think everyone knows, so I don't think it really matters. In this video, we're just talking about the going first combos, which I also think most people know, but I do want to show off the different varieties that you can take by doing this going first line that are pretty interesting, right? So let's go ahead and take our 2 starter cards here. Now, these cards can be interchanged, whether it's Bidora, Zongdora, or it's Bidora, Common Sengen, or Zongdora, Common Sengen. So all these cards kind of work together, even the Field Spell as well, right? So all these 2-card combos, there's essentially 12 cards in this entire deck, which is Common, Manor, Bidora, Zongdora. If you draw any combination of them, they just grab the other one. So for this specific example, we'll just use Bidora and Zongdora. We're going to use Bidora's effect to get the Field Spell. And now we can go ahead and special summon our Zongdora because we do control Bidora. And now we can go ahead and Synchro for our Ancient Fairy Dragon. Ancient Fairy, we can now use the Brimming Sengen to add our level 4 Fidora first before we use our Ancient Fairy's effect, so we do have something to send. Keep in mind that you need a card to send. For this specific example, we're just going to grab it to our hand, but you do need to discard a card, which if you're going first, you definitely have cards. Next up, we're going to go ahead and use Ancient Fairy's effect to grab our Necro Valley. Now this card's pretty important here because you need a card to set for the Zulkin that we're going to be using in this combo. Now we're going to be using Ancient Fairy Dragon to special summon Fidora. Fidora will get Zongdora. We'll go ahead and make our Sengen Rise Dragon Biden, which is pretty much a debris dragon. It could bring something back. We'll bring back a Zongdora. Doesn't really matter here because we're going to link it off anyway for our Hieratic Seal. Next up, we'll make our Zulkin with our 2 Synchro Monsters. And then we'll go ahead and use Set Necro Valley, activate our Zulkin, summon Crystal Wing. Link these 2 away for the Hieratic Seal, then flip Necro Valley. What I really find interesting about this combo actually is because a lot of people will tell me that like, oh, Necro Valley isn't really that great, but the problem with this is I think Necro Valley is actually pretty good if you have a board and hand traps, because imagine them trying to push through your board, let's say a Snake Eyes deck, but they can't use Snake Eyes Oak, they can't use Flamberge Dragon's Reborn effect, and they can't use Charmers, and they can't use Princess, right? Like they can't use a lot of these cards that are very good to break a board. Obviously, if there are, if there's like no cards on field, no interruption, yeah, Necro Valley probably isn't the best card because it's easily outed. But with the Crystal Wing backed up, you can negate like Nightmare Phoenix, you can negate SP Little Knight, you can bounce it before it comes out, things of that nature. It makes it really hard for them to actually clear this Necro Valley on top of clearing your board. So that's why I really like the Necro Valley in this specific path. Now, something else that you can do with this combo in particular, and let's go ahead and rewind for a little bit, is when we summon the Ancient Fairy Dragon like we had before, we can also summon a Shooting Riser Dragon instead of the Sengen. Now, what's really cool is you have a plethora of cards to send. Just for example, what you can do is you can send something like Medora. Let's say if like Tearlaments, you know, for some reason gets popular again and Kit Kalos goes off the ban list. Oh, this is pretty cool. We can send Medora or Keldo and things like that, and it could be another layer of interruption, right? Obviously, right now we're doing the Crystal Wing stuff because it is more generic, and like I said previously in this video, that I think the Crystal Wing is just a lot better. But as of right now, I do think this is a very solid option for sending a bunch of variety of cards, right? You can also do some funny tricks, like even in the mirror match, sending like Electromagnetic Turtle. I'm going to be honest, it's not that great, but it is pretty funny, right? And obviously in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh, you can send so many different cards because, you know, we don't have a pool or anything. So, you know, you can send variety of cards that I find pretty funny with this deck. So I like that it has this option available to us, even though it probably isn't that good right now over the Crystal Wing stuff. So I think that's going to be it for this one. This is just me showing you an example of the full combo with a bunch of hand traps. Like I said, like a Snake Eyes deck could typically beat Snake Relic, but it cannot beat all of these cards, right? So let's go ahead and go over to our conclusion part of this entire video after this combo now, just to show you guys my overall thoughts on this deck and how it pairs into this post LED format, post April banlist format, post Snake Eyes 2.0 format. And let's go ahead and dive over there and we'll close off the video. So for this last portion of this entire video, I wanted to go over and talk to you guys about if this deck is good next format or not. Now, this is a tier list that I made right when the ban list came out, and I still stand by this tier list. Also, fuck all y'all who literally said that I was stupid for putting Pure Snake Eyes there because Baron and Savage are banned, so Pure Snake Eyes is unplayable. Guys, just listen to me, okay? Like, God, like, stop arguing with me. I know my stuff, all right? Anyways, that's a different topic for another video, but yeah. It lands right here, perfectly right here on this exact ban list. I do not think it's better than the Snake Eyes deck. I do think the game plan of this deck, overall as a deck, it is a gimmick, right? It is a cheese, a kill you in one turn strategy. While yes, it is a very good cheese one card strategy, like it's efficient in what it's trying to do, it's still pretty cheesy in the sense that if your opponent knows you're doing it, they can prepare for it. Obviously, there's other ways to play this deck, like Smokescreen Sighting, which I don't think is that great, by the way. So overall, this deck is definitely one of those decks where if you're prepared against it, it's not that great. But if you don't prepare for this deck and you just think this deck is dog shit and you're like, oh, I'm not going to sign anything for Tenpai because Tenpai is so bad, then you will lose to it. Right, it has a very similar vibe to like Voice's Voice. Like imagine we all, like Snake Eyes players, right? We played against Voice's Voice, but we weren't allowed to have like Bystials, Ash Blossom, and Cosmics against that deck. Like we're gonna start losing, right? The reason why we're winning is because we were actually prepared for them as a Snake Eyes player, right? And same thing just goes to Tenpai as well, even post ban list, post LED. I do think Snake Eyes as a deck, you know, the concept of the deck is like, it's a combo deck that does stuff going first, bunch of hand traps going second. It fills every role that a good tier 1/tier 0 deck can have. But Tenpai, like, bro, like, it's just so bad going first that it has to play some gimmick strategies like Crystal Wing and Heretic Seal, which, by the way, aren't bad, but it's like, you can still lose to hand traps as well. Like, imagine just Nibiruing this deck, right? Like, going first. Like, you just lose, you know? But yeah, I do think overall, this is an entire overview of this entire deck. I do think that this deck is going to be a very strong contender, like a tier 1 1.5, but it will not reach its heights as its as the Snake Eyes deck, right? I don't know why I lagged there, but yeah, Snake Eyes will still be the best deck even past this, in my opinion, of course. But I do think Tenpai won't be a bad deck at all. So if you're thinking of investing into this deck, it's probably going to be the next best deck after these decks get hit, just judging by how the order of the tier list works. But that's going to be it for this entire video, guys. I know that this video was a long one, but if you guys made it this far, don't forget to leave a like, comment, and sub, and I'll catch you all in the next one.